People have a habit of reaching for cliches when crafting stories, one of the most pervasive of which is probably good and evil, honor and dishonor, right and wrong. And fairly so, audiences love to cheer for a clear-cut hero and denounce a putrid villain. Part of the reason for that might be because our real lives lack such clearly defined lines. There's no moral undertone to going shopping or staying in, or even larger choices like what to do for work or where to live. These aren't moral choices, they're just choices. The world isn't made up of heroes and villains, it's simply made up of people. But in video games, writers have a habit of making choices highly moral in nature. It often feels like every decision is designed to push along one of two distinct narratives. Either you, the player, are a good person or a bad person. Rescue or harvest the little sisters, kill or spare your enemies. In Fallout 3, it's help your father save the world or disgrace him by eradicating all mutated life forms. Become a hero or a villain. And make no mistake, this is fun. This is comfortable, it makes sense, and it's easy to follow right to the end of the story, but when the ending is easy to understand, then the journey can become direct, even brief. It's hard to slow down when your motivations are so clear. This isn't always a problem, but what happens in an open world? When the player slows down in order to pursue other interests, it often feels like willful procrastination. Sure, maybe there's a leveling or scaling issue with the main story, causing the player to step away and level up elsewhere, but there's no practical logic to that. It's a reality that exists in the mind of the player, not within the fiction of the game. But whether it's due to leveling or procrastination, straying from the main story often causes a ludonarrative dissonance, which is the name for when gameplay and story don't add up. From a story standpoint, the main quest is almost always the path of clearest urgency, but from a gameplay standpoint, the player may simply want to have more fun doing other things, or if they are not a high enough level, they need to acquire more experience before they can pursue the most important quest. Most open-world games, paradoxically, try to make their players care about the main story, while also trying to make their players experience as much of the game world as possible. Now, if you've played Fallout New Vegas, you might already have a sense that New Vegas does something differently on this front, but what? How? How does New Vegas manage to create choices that are engaging, mostly amoral, and somewhat lacking in urgency? Well, the first thing it does for the player is it completely detaches them from any preconceived loyalties. In New Vegas, there is no home to save, no family to find. You're a courier. You've got no friends, no community, nothing. At the start of the game, you have been rescued by a doctor that you've never met, and the gunshot wound in your head gives you a natural excuse to act however you'd like. The only thing the game gives you in the way of main story is finding the guy who shot you, but oh yeah, you might not want to find the guy who almost killed you. That also makes perfect sense. It makes about as much sense as trying to find him, depending on what kind of person you are. Well, if you don't want to find him, that's no problem. Here's the Mojave. There's tons of crazy stuff to do out there. Go nuts. Have fun. So right off the bat, you really feel like a free agent in New Vegas. There's no one in the game to disappoint by not finding Benny straight away, and instead just following your every impulse. You are isolated from the scrutiny of other characters because no other character seems to know you. But even if you choose to progress the main story straight away, New Vegas never puts forward a framework of what you should do. The right thing to do never emerges. The main story is remarkably morally subjective. The factions are not easily placed into the good guys and the bad guys. If you think law and order is good, then sure, go with the NCR, but you'll have to accept corruption and imperialism as consequences for that action. If you think greed, gluttony, and debauchery are evil, then Caesar's legion thinks so too, but they use slavery, torture, and violence to uphold those values. Mr. House is a totalitarian leader who wants your help building a stronger military for himself, but he's also charming, even-tempered, and highly rational in his decision-making. If you don't like any of those options, fine, but you'll have to follow in the footsteps of the man who ruthlessly shot you at the beginning of the game if you want to end up in control of everything yourself. This intentional dichotomy is brilliant for two reasons. For one, it's just flat out interesting. There is no right answer. I mean, most people agree that Caesar's legion feels like the least ethical faction, but good luck getting anyone to agree on which of the other options is best. Even on their own, in a single playthrough, players will go back and forth on which ending they want as they play. This is the second reason it's brilliant, because the difficult choice is likely to make the player procrastinate, but it gives them a reason, a good reason, that works within the context of the story. There's no sense of urgency. The Battle of Hoover Dam will happen when it happens. So if you can't decide on which ending to choose and you don't want to progress things, the natural response is to simply learn more about the situation. Go out and do quests for the different factions, get a good feel for them and the world, so you can make a more informed decision when the time comes. And if you do all that, explore the Mojave, beat the DLCs, do most of the side quests and things, you will truly feel like a one-person army. New Vegas's unique weapons are extremely powerful, and after a few laps around the desert, you'll acquire your fair share of treasures. So when the Battle of Hoover Dam finally comes, you'll probably feel like a person that has earned their right to turn the tides of this war. In New Vegas, you aren't important because you're someone's son or someone's dad, or even because you're the courier who Benny shot at the beginning of the game. You are important in New Vegas because you made yourself that way. You are powerful, and you now have the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And look, hand-holding is an important part of storytelling. Ideas get recycled because they work. Clichés become clichés because they're good and they're comforting. In open world games, the biggest cliché is the good, bad, and neutral endings. Any array of options in most games can seemingly be placed into those three camps, and sometimes it's welcomed. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a brilliant example of clean-cut premises in morality in a game's ending, but New Vegas really breaks the mold by first giving us a character that doesn't lend themselves to anything, and then by giving us a choice with no one right answer. There is no ludonarrative dissonance in New Vegas, whether you beat every single quest or just the main story. It always reads as a tangible and logical progression of your character. Unless, I don't know, you deliberately try to contradict yourself and be confusing all the time, but too much freedom in an open world game is never really a bad thing. Other games are liable to try and control their player through optional storytelling pressures, like telling you your backstory or creating a sense of urgency in the narrative. This has to happen right now, make a choice, you know? But in extreme cases, they will use unavoidable pressures. Invincible NPCs, invisible barriers, locked cutscenes, or QuickTime events. All of these have their place, but all of them are also extremely common in role-playing games. And that's why, over a decade later, Fallout New Vegas is still a breath of fresh air. Because, much like in life, in New Vegas, you are who you choose to be. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.